It's winter and it's cold outside, so I don't want to be outside gardening, but I want to do some gardening. So it's a great time to start sharpening all of those tools that you used all summer long. In this video, I'm going to go through all my tools and describe the type of blade they have. Each one's a little different, and it's important you understand those differences. Then I'll look at several options for sharpening tools, and finally I'll match the best sharpening device to each of my tools so you know which one to use. As a bonus in this video, I have a special discount for several of these sharpening devices, and that's in the description below, and I'll explain how to use it in a few minutes. Alright, let's have a look at each one of my tools. And I'm going to start with this one. It's a kitchen knife. It's not really meant to go outside in the garden, but it's important that we look at this because you're familiar with it. When you're looking at these cutting tools, it's important to look at them from the blade end towards the handle and to look at them this way and have a look at the shape of that blade. Now, in a kitchen knife, it's very thin and it's beveled on both sides. Beveled this way and it's beveled this way. So if we look at the top of this blade, it forms a V shape. This is a little hatchet, and it's actually a pretty handy garden tool. It has the same shape as a kitchen knife. It's beveled on both sides, but you can see it's much thicker than a kitchen knife. And that's important when you're picking a sharpening tool for this. You might also notice that it's not all that sharp. Because it's so thick, it's very hard to get a real sharp edge here. This tool is more for pounding and cutting at the same time, so we don't need a perfect edge here. When you look at the blade of a scissor, it's quite different than a knife. First of all, we have two blades, so that makes it different. But even a single blade, you'll notice that if you look at it, it's flat on this side and beveled on the other side. If we flip it around, again, it's flat on this side and beveled on the other one. Where the two blades touch, it's flat. The other thing you should notice is the angle of the bevel. Whereas on the knife, it was very vertical, partly because the knife is so thin. On a scissor, the bevel is more horizontal. It's shaped like this. That's really important for sharpening this. Here's some hedge trimmers. Now, I know a lot of gardeners don't use this tool because we don't have hedges anymore. Even I don't have a hedge. But I find that this is a great tool to cut back plants, particularly in spring when you're cutting everything back to the ground. Rather than using a small pruner or something cutting, you can get a lot done real quick with this. If we have a look at this, it's really just a big scissor. And if we look at the blade, again, we have a flat section and a beveled section. And both pieces are exactly the same. Here's another scissor. Well, at least it looks like a scissor, but the blade is a bit different. In this case, we have two different kinds of blades. This is called the blade, and this is called the anvil. This part is flat here and flat at the top. There's no sharp edges here. The blade itself is flat on one side, just like a scissor, but beveled on the other side. The bevel here is very steep. It's more like a knife, partly because this is so thin. Now there's one other tool I'd like to show you. Have you ever tried chopping wood? I bet you used an axe, which is really just like a hatchet. But there's another tool that's more interesting, and that's a sword. My son bought one of these, and here we are chopping up some lumber for the fireplace using a sword. Now that's a really cool tool, but I know most of you don't have it. We also have this tool here. These are called loppers. They're really just like a pruner, except everything's a bit larger. The cutting blade's larger, the handles are larger. But if you have a look at the blade, it's just like a pruner. You've got an anvil here that has no sharp edges, and then you've got the blade here. Again, flat on one side, beveled on the other side. Now that we understand the various tools we have, let's look at some sharpening devices. This is a very traditional tool for sharpening. It's a file, and they come in different grades. So you have a coarser one and a finer one. You probably have some of these at home, so that's one reason why this is a pretty good tool. But it does have some limitations. This is a newer device called the diamond sharpening file. It has a flat surface on one side, and this other side is mostly flat, but it does curve along the sides and near the front. It has very tiny diamond chips on the surface, so it's a really good file. Now I got this file from TEMU. TEMU is a new company that's selling things online and have quite a wide range of products. Here's another sharpening device from TEMU. It's a plastic handle with a guard to protect your fingers, and then there's a blade in here. This is a tungsten metal, so tungsten is quite hard, and it's used for sharpening different devices. We're going to have a close look at this device in the rest of this video. Who is TEMU? Well, TEMU is a company that sells products online. They have a lot of gardening products, also products for the general home use, for workshops, wide range of products. Ordering is online. They give very high discounts and shipping is free. Now the TEMU products I'm reviewing here were supplied by them, but I'm under no obligation to say anything positive about them. So I'm going to give you my honest opinion about the product. They've also given me a discount coupon, and it's in the description below. If you use the link and the coupon and you're a first-time buyer from TEMU, you'll get a 30% discount on your order. Now let's have a look at each of these tools and figure out what is the best sharpening device for them. And I'm going to go back and start with the kitchen knife. Now about a year ago I was looking for a new sharpener for our kitchen knives. I used to use a wet sandstone and it worked quite well, but it was a really tedious process to keep our knives sharp, and I was looking for something that was a little more automatic. I came across this device here. This device has two pieces of metal in here and they're shaped like a V. And they happen to fit really nicely on top of the blade. I ordered some of these and I think these are just fabulous for a knife. Using them is really simple. I take the knife and I usually hold it down on the counter so I have a good support. I take this device and just run it along the blade. If you have some older knives around and they haven't been sharpened in a while, you may have to do this 4 or 5 times. But once they're sharp, if you use this once every week or two, a couple passes and your knife is always sharp. Now if you're really fussy about your knives and you just want them done perfectly, you probably won't like this tool. It's a bit rougher than a sandstone, but it's so much easier. I think most people will use it more often and they'll have sharper knives because of it. This is fantastic for knives. The next tool I'd like to look at is the hatchet. Now there are a couple ways you could sharpen this. The traditional way is with a file, and that works quite well. You simply pass it back and forth on the blade, turn the blade over, do the other side, and you've got a sharp edge. The nice thing about a file is that you can start with a coarse one, get most of the metal off so you get close to an edge, switch over to a fine one, and then finish it off. And that works quite well. The other alternative is this tool here, and it works quite well too. Simply grab it and hatch it, and you have a sharp edge. If you do this every time you take the hatchet out of the shed, you'll always have a sharp hatchet to work with. The other advantage of this over a file is that with a file, you're the one who has to control the angle of that blade. If you don't hold it at the right angle, you're not going to get a good sharp edge. This one, on the other hand, has a fixed angle, and so you don't have to worry about it. You just pass it along. You don't have to know anything about sharpening to use this tool. That's why I think this may be the better option. What about our scissors? But I don't think it's a very good option. Remember that the angle in here is fixed, and it works fine on thinner blades like a knife. But on scissors, we have a flat side and we have a beveled side. So when you slide it along, it's not going to sharpen. Now a year ago, I ordered another device that looks very similar. This one I got from Amazon, and it's called the Shear Sharp. It has a different angle in here for the metal, and in fact it's flat, it's horizontal. This one works better on scissors, but what you do have to do is hold it at the right angle. This is designed for scissors. This other one with a V notch is not. What about the big scissors? Well, they have the same problem. Again, this is recommended for sharpening these, but because one side's flat and one side's beveled, they don't really work very well. For these, you're much better off using a file and working away on the edge. Or if you're in the garden, you might want to use this tool here. Remember, it's a diamond edged one, and it does a really nice job of giving you a fine edge. This tool can also be used in the house to use scissors. When you're sharpening blades like scissors that have one side flat, it's important that you do your bevel first, and then the last thing you do is you take this and keep it very flat on the blade and just go across once. That takes the burrs off the edge. What about pruners? This is one tool you do want to keep very sharp. Which of these tools would I use to sharpen my pruner? Well, we'll start with the file. The file does work. It's a bit cumbersome to get it in here because the anvil and the blade are too small. The anvil is in the way. So using a file is a little harder. That's where this tool is kind of nice for pruners. It's essentially a smaller file, and it has no problem getting in the edge. When you're pruning these, it's important to keep this at the right angle. So you want to use the same angle all the way along. And then when you're finished, turn it over and do one grind on the flat side. I also usually do this part. The anvil sometimes get burrs, and if you take off those burrs, it will work a little better. So this is a great tool for pruners. What about this tool? Does it work on pruners? It has two problems. One, it doesn't really fit in here. So I can do the tip, but I can't do the back part. And number two, as I've already explained, this is designed for a blade that is beveled on both sides, not designed for this kind of blade. So I would not use this tool on a pruner. The exact same thing goes for loppers. I mean, loppers are just big pruners, and everything I've said about them is the same, except perhaps that it's easier to get a file in. There's a bigger space in here, and there's room for a file. So you could use this kind of file, or you could use this file. This one's a little easier to carry around in the garden, so it might be a better option. So there you have it. That's my review. This is a really great device for blades, things like knives. This is really nice for sharpening round things like pruners and loppers. And for really large blades like a hedge trimmer and an axe, I probably prefer this one here, a regular file. Since we're talking about tools for the garden, have you ever heard of a hori-hori? It's a special digging knife for the garden, and it's becoming more popular. So I did a video to compare the hori-hori with the trowel to show you which tool works best in different situations. Have a look at that video right now.